Expectations are such an interesting aspect of art. Everybody's got them, but somehow if you voice them explicitly, you're biased and subjective. Because at the end of the day, it's not the art's fault you have expectations, it's yours or mine. If you watch any review closely, and this includes mine for that matter, you'll see how expectations bleed in like water gushing through a hole of a boat. I mean, you could argue my entire channel's appeal is a lack of expectations. The fact that I'm some comic newbie going into this with few points of comparison, with fresh eyes, and unfortunately, I don't think that's true in this case. I mean, Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli are the very first artist and writer I ever read in comic form. Full stop. So naturally, Batman Year One, the very first video I ever put on my channel, is a level of quality that I'll be expecting, whether consciously or not. Bringing this full circle, I want to talk about this elephant in the room, not in an effort to dismiss it or dispute it in some way, but to align our expectations. When I read my first Daredevil comic a few months ago, I had no expectations because I had never heard the name Matt Murdock. But as I delved into Frank Miller's core, iconic run, I saw how much the quality improved with his pen, and you guessed it, surpassed my expectations. Conversely, towards the end of the run, I thought the opposite. It was far too stretched out. It was recycling way too many ideas. And finally, I know I put it in the last video, but Love and War just totally blew them out of the water. I fucking love that. If I came out with that video again, I would call it the best Daredevil comic written that I've read because it is. It's freaking fire. My point is, depending on the order that you read these comics, you might be coming into this video with a vastly different mindset than I am. So I'd like us to hold hands and come into this video with a shared question. What does Daredevil Born Again really achieve for this character? My answer is, unfortunately, not much. When asked to return to the series that made him a comic book icon, the series that he saved from cancellation and turned into a bestseller, Frank Miller had two conditions. One, David Mazzucchelli would need to return to be the sole artist on the project, and honestly, good job, Frank. That's a great decision. And the second, he would need to be allowed creatively to strip Daredevil down to its essentials. He needed to be born again.
Oh, that's why they call it that.
So let's start with the first condition, because David Mazzucchelli, who broke my comic art cherry, is a very welcome addition here. Having seen so many other artists since, it's just made me appreciate how technically skilled Mazzucchelli is. There's definitely a few artists who rely on some visual gimmick, but when you look at Mazzucchelli's work, you never really feel like he needs that. He just lets the art speak for itself. To this day, I honestly have not found another artist like him. He uses light and fire in such a unique way. These panels are so fun to look at. I would say the art is strongest at the beginning, especially when he's like weaving in and out of different styles. But expectations alert, it's not his best work. In prior issues, I've complimented the black panels that show Matt's perspective, and I think they were used very tastefully prior. But in Born Again, we get like 4 straight pages of majority black panels. That is just way too many. I think the middle chunk especially has a lot of pages that I would consider recycled. I just don't really think the art is as tight as it should be. It's not unusual to see some stinkers. I will say, like, the covers and the splash pages are gorgeous. I adore every single one. I wasn't obsessed with the art, but I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it's some big problem because it's time to talk about Miller's second condition. Spoilers. For all the bitching I've already done, Daredevil Born Again has a very strong opening. Matt's ex-girlfriend Karen Page is a drug addict desperate for a fix, and in a fit of desperation leaks his secret identity to Kingpin. Now, you might be asking the same question I did. Who the fuck is Karen Page and why does she know Matt's identity? Pretending we read this in 1986, it would have been nearly 9 years since she had appeared in a Daredevil comic, and coupled with the fact that the majority of the readership came post-Miller, it's just a bizarre choice to do this. Now me, I'm pretty used to characters that I have never seen before dropping in and being really important, so I didn't really mind it as much. But it seems like one of the few universal criticisms of Born Again is Karen's depiction, because last we saw her, she'd have no indication that she'd have any substance abuse problems and like selling her body. And I can definitely understand how you might read that and think it's for shock value, but honestly, She's a major character, and I would argue the only one with an actual arc. So while I can definitely be like, haha, Frank Miller does not really write women well, dog, I think Karen might be the best written woman I've read from Frank Miller. The point is, this opening is so effective because it immediately establishes the stakes. Kingpin knows who Daredevil is, and I think it uses one of the great Miller emotions, misery. If there is one type of world that he is good at writing, it's a miserable one. And after Kingpin bankrupts, disbars, and just fucks Matt over in every way possible, you feel the weight of the situation.
Have a good day.
Don't tell me what to do.
If I had to boil this graphic novel down to what it really adds to the character, I would say this is one of the few, because Matt at his lowest, Matt as this desperate, destitute man, is not one that we've really seen before. But now I get to say something mean, because this conflict is not really compelling. And you might be like, what the fuck? How is that not compelling? Kingpin knows his identity. Matt is disbarred. His whole life is shattered. But at this point, we have been seeing Daredevil and Kingpin in conflict for nearly 40 issues. And to their credit, there's been a ton of different angles that they've used to keep it fresh. But I think it's finally caught up with them. Kingpin is such an interesting villain because his motivations are make that bread and save his wife. He doesn't really give a shit about Daredevil unless it affects one of those. And there's like a lot of praise on the internet about how Kingpin is this nice metaphor for Satan. I just don't think that's true. One of the most interesting stories in the Bible is the book of Job, where basically Satan and God do like a heavenly bet on this dude Job, who is a really righteous guy, that if they take away all of his earthly possessions and his family, that he'll basically turn into a terrible person, that his being pious, his being righteous is contingent on his life circumstances. And Satan, when he's portrayed as an actual figure and not like just kind of an idea or like an inclination, is a very complex villain. And coupled with Kingpin's prior depth, creatively, you have a ton to work with here, but I'm sad to say that they totally strip Kingpin of all of that. But whatever, Matt is destitute and Kingpin fucking kicks his ass, which is freaking awesome writing and awesome art, and I love this whole sequence. But I just don't like it when people are like, oh, this is such a brilliant retelling of Jesus. Like, it flashes constant comparisons at you, but if you just spend the time to dig below that initial level, it totally falls through. Let's take Karen for an example. She's obviously our Judas, where Judas sells Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver. She sells Matt out for a fix of heroin. They both betray our heroes and are consumed by guilt. And that makes sense on the surface. Like, you might say, yeah, that totally is right. But let's just dig one level down. But fundamentally, Judas is the example, the archetype of the lost soul. He commits suicide, and I'm so far from a theologian, it's crazy. But Karen is the opposite. She is totally redeemed, and in fact gets a happy ending with Matt where they can be in love and everything's so nice, he. And like, I don't want to say things that I'm not an expert in, but it is kind of insulting, like, oh, you're just addicted to heroin and now you're not magically. My point is, this comic is not as smart as it wants to be. I think they really should have made this maybe 2 or 3 issues shorter. There's a lot of sequences like Foggy trying to beat up the guy who's trying to pimp out Karen that have like no stakes, no consequences, no anything. And Miller is like obsessed with Ben Urich, who's like this reporter for the Daily Bugle. He gets a strangely big amount of love. And I'm not complaining, because I do think it's a cool way when a writer is like super passionate about a side character, but he gets like he's probably the second most important character in the story. It's not fucking true. Why did I say that? But all the side characters just kind of talk the same. I don't know. Miller has this very nice style of writing, but he doesn't have a diverse style of writing. When it works, it works. There's this part where Kingpin is like, a man without hope is a man without fear, and he constantly is repeating, there was no corpse, there was no corpse. That shit is fucking sick. So this is when Daredevil is born again, the condition that made Miller come back, the thing he held on to so tightly. Obviously, if Matt is going to be born again, something needs to fundamentally change about him. And again, if you think about it for 5 seconds, something actually does. Matt gives up being a lawyer. He finally finds happiness with Karen in a simple life and becomes a true man without fear. But unpack this wrapper with me. The most famous quote in the comic, and honestly like Daredevil history, I think, is, a man without hope is a man without fear. But this is in direct conflict with Matt's life at the end of the story. He is the happiest and most hopeful that I have ever seen him. I mean, look at that smile. But does that mean he wasn't happy or hopeful before? Because he does give up being a lawyer, sure, but that's it. Is working in a diner really being born again? Matt is essentially the same guy as I first saw him, a vigilante protecting the people of Hell's Kitchen. The only difference is his tax bracket. And you know why I'm getting so worked up about this? Because there are so many more better Daredevil transformational and reflective moments that I've read before. Like in the Revolver issue, which is honestly maybe my favorite of his run, he takes his beautiful lens towards how he glorifies violence. When he accepts Elektra is dead, he internalizes that he can't save everyone. I don't know if this status quo is maintained in like future Daredevil issues, but I honestly hope not. The idea of reading a Daredevil with a Matt Murdock who is not a lawyer sounds incredibly boring. The one character who I think is actually born again is Karen. She actually has an arc of overcoming her addiction, finally learning to love herself, and ending up with Matt. So call this shit Karen Page born again. By the way, I have read theories that the end of the comic suggests that Matt has given up being Daredevil, but I don't really think there's a lot of evidence to support that. Just feels like Miller wants to make his cake and eat it too. It's a weird expression, wants his cake and eats it too. Okay, I'm done with being negative. I want to say some good things now. I like that Gladiator has a little role to play. I think it's really cute how much Miller just like loves him for some reason. I think Matt looks sexy as hell with this beard. And I think the nun being his mom is a pretty interesting and cool thing they throw in. The deadpan humor is so on point. Put simply, gentlemen, crime is on the rise and therefore so are our profits. Meeting adjourned. I wish my meetings were like that. I really love it when they do these small panels. It feels like everyone nowadays wants fewer, bigger panels, so this is a really great way to build tension. The action is consistently great with a ton of awesome moments, and Karen is probably one of the most human characters that I've read in the series so far. And of course, like the moments that are just like aura farming go so hard. They're so fucking awesome. Like when Daredevil is like all in flames behind Nuke, and I'll get to him later, but it's fucking awesome. So we've set the stage, and I want to talk about the ending because it's a bit of a mess. So Kingpin calls in this guy Nuke, who is this basically lunatic the army uses to blow shit up. And I mean, this is the archetype, I've said this before, that Miller really writes the best. Just an absolute fucking maniac. And he's not quite Victor or Bullseye levels, but he's still stellar, don't get me wrong. Nuke is this really rabid American warhawk type of fella. And it really reminds me about how in like older anime Americans were portrayed, like Bandit Keith and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Kingpin's all like, the man he is learning to hate is the man he is learning to fear, and he like redecorates his office with way more American flags to make him look more patriotic. And his speech to Nuke to manipulate him to basically kill Daredevil, thinking that he's some enemy of America, is genuinely well written and manipulative. And I think Matt has really felt the brunt of my complaints so far, but I would say I'm significantly more disappointed by Kingpin. Did I miss a story where Kingpin becomes a fucking dumbass? He is usually so cold and calculated, and his conflict with Daredevil is never this emotional. It's always about either, again, his wife or his business. Kingpin's master plan is probably his worst yet. He basically wants to bring Nuke to New York City, have him like flatline all of Hell's Kitchen in an effort to bring Daredevil out, and then figure it out as he goes. It's basically the meme of like step 1, step 2, step 3 profit, but in comic form. But like, again, I might remind you, Matt is presumed dead, and while there is belief to think that he's still alive, he's not doing anything. He's just fucking vibing, you know, trying to get his life back together. He is posing no threat to any of Kingpin's operations. They're just kind of going on business as usual. Why take this insane risk of like nuking New York City and killing millions of people? I've established in prior videos like his plans can be kind of convoluted, very Emperor Palpatine-esque, but this is just insane. It's also hilarious though that like Kingpin's advisors like show up multiple times, but they're always shown as like these dumb, insolent fools who have nothing of value to add. But this is like the one time where they're actually right. Like Kingpin should unironically be listening to these people. I mean, they're just like, dude, why are you going to destroy New York City? We're making bank. I would say the one plus side of this whole Michigas is that all hell breaks loose in this last issue. Daredevil does kill a guy, which I'm fine with. I'm constantly getting mixed messaging if he's actually a do not kill type of hero or not. And out of absolutely fucking nowhere, the Avengers show up. This is like 20 pages left in this entire 7-issue story. Captain America. I mean, and Iron Man and Thor are in it, but they're like for like a panel. But Captain America does not belong in this story. Personally, this is a conspiracy theory, okay? We're completely in like interpretation territory. I think Captain America was in this story because they were afraid of being too anti-America. Nuke is obviously like this crazy American who's fucking up third world countries, and like that's a valid criticism of America, but it's fine, I don't mind. But it's totally undermined when Captain America needs to go in and prove that the true America is virtuous. And that statement is totally like doable creatively. I have no issue with either of them. But they are in conflict with each other. It's example upteen of Frank Miller wanting his cake and eating it too. You can't have it both ways. And I just ignore it. Had it not been a good amount of time we spend with Captain America, who, from my research, last interacted with Daredevil 13 years ago. And if you're talking like direct interaction, all the way back in 1968. I get like Nuke and Steve Rogers are both super soldiers and parallels of each other, but dog, put that shit in a different story. This is Daredevil and Karen. The good guys win, and then Kingpin retires. He spends the whole book, honestly, like the whole series, being like, yes, Kingpin, is 5 steps ahead, and we will make the provisions necessary to take the appropriate actions. And then he's like, okay, let me try fucking destroying all of New York City. Oh, it didn't work? I guess I'll stop being Kingpin. Kingpin should only stop from his wife. That's the Kingpin I know. Kingpin is just whittled down from these insane levels of soft power. Everyone is indebted to him. He owns the police. The generals are in his pockets. He gets Foggy a job. He disbars Matt. But then you tell me everyone, including like the law, just turns against him, although he can use his lawyers to prevent anything actually happening of consequence, presumably so we can put him in future stories. And like, frankly, it feels like they're pulling a George Lucas, that they're trying to wrap everything up so neatly, it really undermines the whole fucking thing.
Don doesn't wear shorts.
Also, this collected edition of Born Again includes Daredevil 226, which is a different thing that Mazzucchelli and Miller did. I'm not going to talk about it, but it basically has Gladiator kind of regressing into like a threat. I just didn't like that because I love that they rehabilitated Gladiator. I don't have anything else to say. I'm sad that they made him like that. I do think I made it seem like I disliked this comic a little bit more than I actually did. So let's come back to expectations. I see immense value in Born Again and being kind of like a spark notes for Miller's other work. If you don't want to read all these issues that Miller did over the course of like nearly a decade, Born Again is not a bad substitute. But for me, there are just so many far better stories from Miller's other Daredevil work. So I would recommend, if you're a new reader, read Man Without Fear, read the best issues from his core run, which I'm going to put here in the description, and also read Love and War. I would say if that's too much, just read Man Without Fear and Love and War, and that's it. I mean, this is not a bad comic, guys. It's far from it. I would actually call it pretty good. It is nice art, a decent story, fantastic action, and some genuinely heartfelt moments, which are kind of rare in Frank Miller stories. But I can't help but think, I know David Mazzucchelli, I know Frank Miller, and I know they're capable of more. This is my 5th video in the Frank Miller Daredevil series, and I feel like each one has added something new for me. Man Without Fear added this sympathetic origin story that is honestly one of my favorites. The run adding Kingpin as this smart, practical villain, Bullseye as this maniac you can't stop watching, and Elektra because she's just so fucking fine. But when I think about the absolute highlights that I have with this character and this creator, Daredevil Born Again does not even make the top 10. And there's no way that I can describe my disappointment with this comic with anything but this phrase: it did not fulfill my expectations. You all know that there's one more thing I have to do, other than tell you to subscribe, of course, is give this a rating. So I am going to give Daredevil Born Again, a 6 out of 10. I do want to like combine my videos and do some more thoughts on Miller once I have a little bit more time to reflect, but if you want to watch my other videos in the series, I'll have them here and in a pinned comment. But I'm not done with Heartbreak just yet, because next week, for the first time in like 6 or 7 months, 6, 7, I'm coming back to Wonder Woman. And I hope you have a good one. Peace.